Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight's forum event hosted by the Institute of Politics and Public Service at the McCourt School of Public Policy, known to many of you as GU Politics. My name is Facundo Robles. I'm a second-year graduate student in the McCourt School for Public Policy, and I am also the president of the Latin America and the Caribbean Policy Association, LAPA, here at Georgetown. We are pleased to partner with Geopolitics on this evening's event, along with the Georgetown Latino Policy Initiative, GLPI, in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. Tonight's conversation will focus on how the Latino voice will shape the 2024 election. With the election a little over a year away, we are bringing together experts from different perspectives to discuss the impacts and power of the Latino vote. Tonight's conversation will feature Daniel Garza and Fall 2023 Geopolitics Fellow, Cristobal Alex. Daniel Garza currently serves as president of the Libre Initiative, a nonpartisan, nonprofit grassroots organization dedicated to amplifying the voice of the U.S. Hispanic community so it can thrive and contribute to a more prosperous America. He has dedicated his career to advocating on behalf of Hispanics for sound public policy. Daniel served in the George W. Bush administration as Deputy Director of External and Intergovernmental Affairs in the Office of the Secretary at the Department of Interior, and later as Associate Director in the Office of Public Liaison at the White House. In 2007, Daniel joined Univision to host and co-produce Agenda Washington, a weekly Spanish-language news talk show covering the issues impacting the U.S. Hispanic community. He previously was president of Televisa's Hispanic Poder group, overseeing editorial, commercial, and promotion of publications. Cristobal Alex is a senior government, political, and advocacy leader. Cristobal was the founding president of the Latino Victory Fund, helping elect more than 70 candidates to office, from the school board to the U.S. Senate. He currently serves as head of Task Strategies DC office and recently joined Future Forward USA Action, where he's leading a new Latino advertising effort supporting President Biden's re-election. Cristobal previously served as the White House Deputy Cabinet Secretary, linking the White House and Cabinet, supporting agency coordination on a portfolio of President Biden's top priorities. Among Biden for President's first hires ahead of the 2020 election, Cristobal served as a senior advisor to Joe Biden, where he helped develop and implement state and national strategy. Moderating tonight's conversation is Laura Barrón Lopez, the White House correspondent for PBS NewsHour. Previously, Laura covered the 2020 presidential election for Politico as a national political reporter focusing on voter demographics and policy shifts within the Democratic Party. Please join me in welcoming Laura, Daniel, and Cristobal. Also, please feel free to join this evening's conversation on social media by tagging GU Politics using @GU Politics. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Apologies that I was a little late.
She was on TV.
Well, I was supposed to be on TV. The news never sleeps. So let's dive right in.
Let's do it.
Cristobal, I want to start with you. So in 2020, President Biden ended up winning 63% of the Latino vote, compared to Trump winning about 35%. Recent polling, now this is non-white voters, it doesn't have a breakout for Latino voters, but according to a PBS NewsHour Marist poll, found that President Biden is now at about 53% with non-white voters compared to Trump being at 43%. So that's about a 20-point difference compared to 2020. Why do you think this is happening, and what do you hope changes between now and November?
I thought these were supposed to be easy questions. Let me just first say thank you. I'm so glad to be on stage with both of you. I've long admired Laura and your career and at Politico and at CNN, and we're so lucky to have her representing our important values and really the face on TV and all of these important places. Gracias. And Daniel, I had, thanks to my colleague Maria here, prepared a lot of talking points that were really just jokes about you. But then they told me it was going to be video recorded, and I had to lose one of the entire pages here were just full of jokes. But I do admire what Daniel has built at Libre Initiative. Clearly, we're on other sides of politics, but he's done an amazing job. And the reason he's here today at this prestigious institution is because he's among, if not the most powerful voice on the right when it comes to Latino politics. And your question is a good one. It's one that obviously I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And I'm not going to debate sort of the poll and the issues I have with the polling. What I will say just up front is Joe Biden would not be president today without the Latino vote. And if you look at the states that matter, that deeply matter in a presidential election, the battleground states, in the places where the ones that were very late to be called, right? Whether it's Georgia, Arizona, Nevada was very close, and others. He won those by the slimmest of margins relative to the size of the state. But when you look at those numbers, it was a Latino vote that truly delivered. And not just in those typical states that you think of as Latino states, but in places like Wisconsin, right? People don't think about Wisconsin, but like there's such a fast-growing Latino population. We're now the second largest voting bloc in the country. And so Latinos and what I think of as the Biden coalition, and some of the numbers you're describing are, people of color, working class voters, young people. That's really the true Biden coalition. I think as we get further into this election, those numbers are going to be much higher than the poll you described. In fact, I saw one recently. I'll just talk about the public polling because I'm not at liberty to talk about the private. But I feel actually quite good about where we are, and I'll wrap this up quickly because I know you're going to turn to Daniel to counter me. But I feel very good about where we are in the numbers because Joe Biden has delivered for the community. I think if I look back at recent presidencies, he's done more for Latinos than so many others, whether it's the lowest unemployment rate we've ever seen for Latinos, whether it is things like healthcare, whether it is fighting for women's rights and reproductive rights, whether it's bringing down the prices of insulin. Time after time, he's delivered, and so I feel very good as we get further into the election about building on the big margins he won in the last one.
Danielle, before I start, is there anything you want to say since I jumped ahead of Crystal Ball's intro here?
Well, I mean, I'm sure he's delivered on some things, but on the whole, I think he's broken a lot of promises, especially on immigration reform. He hasn't delivered when it comes to wage growth. Inflation is eating away at the purchasing power of Latino families, and really a lot of them are on their knees, scraping their knees from week to week, that they're gonna, make it from paycheck to paycheck here. And it's been really difficult. And yet, Bidenomics, you'd think everything is bubblegum and lollipops and rainbows, and it's not. It's been really tough. And so then the Fed acts to try to rein in the inflation rate, which was out of control. And so now the cost of renting, of buying a home, is unaffordable for a lot of Latino families. And they're really hurting out there. But again, there's a disconnect between what the administration is saying and what Latinos are feeling, the pain of Bidenomics.
There is a disconnect between the perception and the reality, though, and we'll get back to that, Crystal Ball. I know you may want to respond to this. But before we do, Danielle, I want to ask you, yes, Latinos have at the margins moved in 2020 towards Republicans. They moved towards Trump. That's been accepted. But they didn't necessarily, Republicans didn't actually grow that number in 2022. It was relatively about the same. And still, when we talk all about this, everyone understands that the vast majority of Latino voters in battleground states do vote Democratic. But Republicans have made some gains. That being said,
it wasn't the red wave that people were expecting.
Right, it was not the red wave in 2022.
Latinos didn't come, yeah.
And right now, Republicans are preparing to potentially nominate the former president again as their nominee. And his entire campaign is based on grievance and being attacked by the DOJ, and that the 2020 election was still stolen, that the 2022 election was rigged. I mean, what exactly are Republicans offering to Latino voters?
So keep in mind that the shift happened because under Trump, there was unemployment, there was record labor participation rates, there was record wage growth from the bottom up, the lower quintile, there was record home ownership rates. There was an economic bonanza that Latinos felt right before COVID hit. After COVID comes along, it skews everything, obviously, and he paid the price for that. You're right in the sense that it looks like, by any measure, that Donald Trump is going to be the primary winner as of now, unless, barring something catastrophic happens. Catastrophic as in some incident, not that if he loses, it's catastrophic. I'm not a Trump fan. I just want you to know that. I'm not a never Trumper, but I'm not a Trump fan. It's going to be tough because, of course, it sets the tone for the rest of the ticket, right? Senators are impacted by the turnout because of Trump. Congressmen are impacted by it. State legislative races are impacted by it. If Latinos don't come out, because they don't, feel strongly about a candidate who can represent their interests or can turn around the economy. Look, we just did a poll, and it showed that 80% of Latinos do not think that the future is going to be better for their children. That's a loss of hope. That's a loss of aspiration. We're kind of an aspirational bunch. We're very optimistic, and to get that kind of number was sobering. But it's also a reflection of our times too, right? And so they want to turn the direction, and they want to turn the page on it's got this polarization, this vindictive, I think you said it, it's going to be an administration of grievances and revenge, and that's not how you govern. You govern by reaching across the aisle and reaching consensus on important policies.
So what exactly, since you say you're not a Trump fan, but you're not a never Trumper, I mean, what can Republicans offer Latinos if you're going to try to appeal to them outside of Trump?
Change the direction that we're currently on.
How do you change that if Trump's the nominee?
What you do, of course, is that there are millions of Latinos who agree with Cristobal's sense of, of the role of government. But there are also millions of Latinos who agree with me that we should rein in spending, the reckless spending, that we should reverse the centralization of so much power and money and control in the hands of politicians. A lot of Latinos feel that as power and money grows in Washington, there's a proportionate diminishment of power and money to the individual. And we're impacted by the reckless spending because, of course, inflation takes off, the devaluation of the dollar, healthcare gets tougher, and buying a home gets tougher. Everything is made more difficult because of the policies at the federal level. Someone needs to connect in a very real way with Latinos. And I'll be the first to say that Republicans were god-awful when it came to doing outreach and engagement with minority communities. They stayed away. I'm not going to get into why, but they did. And they paid a heavy price for that. And just now, in the last 10 or so years, they've been playing catch-up because, well, hell, you can't ignore the numbers anymore, right, in a lot of states. And so they have invested. They are connecting with Latinos. Before, it was I'll end real quick here. It was a conversation within the Latino community about politics and policies that was dominated by Univision and Telemundo, by unions, by center-left organizations, by university professors, who leaned hard left. Those were the folks that were showing up. The Democrat Party showed up and made the investments, and they benefited from that. Well, no more. It's a new game. The script has changed, and there is massive mobilization and engagement from both sides, and I think it's changed the score.
May I say something about that real quick? So this was the problem of inviting Daniel Garza. I told Mo this. I'm like, look, I don't want him on the stage with me because he's more handsome, he's more eloquent, he has more money. The one thing I have going for me here is you're wrong on the issues. And Latinos, we've seen this poll after poll, lean very heavily towards the traditional democratic values, right? And I think you and I, we can debate this out, but if you look at whether it is affordable health care, whether it's issues related to guns, which is now a top 5 issue, whether it's issues related to abortion, which is now a top 5 issue, and most importantly, the jobs in the economy. Those are the issues that Latinos care most about, and this is where I also disagree with you, is on Bidenomics, it actually is working for Latinos. I saw a headline, and I've been so busy today, I haven't been able to read the news. I was hoping you would give me a quick primer. Did I read in the Wall Street Journal today that inflation is down to 3.8%? I mean, that we have essentially, I don't want to say defeated inflation, right? It is coming down. And remember why we ended up with all of this inflation in the first place, right? Biden didn't come in and suddenly inflation went like this. There was something called COVID. There was a war in Europe, which we haven't seen the likes of since World War II. There were effects on the supply chains that made all these prices go up. And he has done, and the administration has done, a remarkable job of getting that under control. And I can't think of a single Latino other than Daniel Garza who says, Latinos are worried about too much power in Washington and too much money going that way. Like, no, those are not the issues that Latinos are talking about. They're not. I don't know a single one. Maybe my tia Beatriz, who is a Trumper. Maybe Beatriz and Daniel. Otherwise, they're not.
We all have that
So
tia.
on Bidenomics, though, which is something that the administration, they've now embraced that name. They're trying to get out there and explain what the president has passed. But I was just talking to some other Latino strategists who say that in their focus groups, that Latinos don't know what Bidenomics is, you know, and they're not the only voters that don't know. There's a lot of other voters that don't really realize what the infrastructure bill does, what the Inflation Reduction Act does. So how exactly do you change that specifically with Latino voters?
Yeah, so that, I don't disagree at all with that. We have work to do. I call it this sort of reality gap, right? Where you've got arguably the most successful president in modern history in terms of massive landmark legislation that we've gotten through, right? But when you ask a lot of voters in these polls, they're not equating the improvement in their lives coming out of COVID, the way we have schools reopening, the economy humming, almost at full employment. They're not yet equating it, and that is something that, as a Democrat, we've got to do a better job on. And part of it is also we're kind of far out from the presidential election. So there's a lot of time, and politics is starting much earlier now. Like, when have you ever seen a presidential election on an incumbent fire up this quickly, right? And it's because there's a recognition that, especially with Latinos, that you have to constantly be engaging, and that's because it's a young community, right? It's the youngest and fastest growing community when you look at the age groups of folks under 21. And what that means is we've got to do a lot of educating, a lot of advertising, a lot of deploying key spokespeople out there to make sure folks are making the connection. So, you know, that's going to take some time, and we've got the time, and we need to have the resources to do it as well. The Super PAC needs to raise significant resources. The campaign needs to have billions of dollars in resources. But once you do that, you'll start closing what I call that reality gap, that perception that folks don't yet equate the success that they're having in their families and as a country to what the White House is doing. So that's going to take some time.
Laura, it used to be that the low-hanging fruit for Republicans in the last 10 years or so, when they really engaged, or their base even for the last 30, 40 years, was people of faith, older, and rural, working class, not even working class, people who were, you know, of multi-generation. I mean, that's kind of where they had to go to, right, to get the votes. Where they really didn't connect were urban, youth, college educated. Because of this administration's failure to really pass policies that are increasing productivity, opportunity, and salaries, you are seeing the political curiosity of Latinos open up in a way that I've never seen. There's a window of opportunity for Republicans to now make their case that their ideas are superior. In 27 of the last 30 months, wages have been under inflation. That means...
That's not true.
Yes, it is true.
No, it isn't. Over the summer, wages started outpacing inflation. Now, whether or not they're still at that level, they did over the summer. They started outpacing inflation.
You can look it up. In 27 out of the last 30 months, wages have been under
Let's
inflation.
fact check Daniel.
Yeah.
Who's our
Inflation,
fact checker?
well, hold on. Inflation is at 3.9% right now. The average is 2% of inflation a year. It's still twice as much as it should be. The rate of inflation has gone down, sure. But it used to be at 9%, which was ridiculously high. And it's crippling Latinos. So again, that's the disconnect. He's saying everything's great, but Latinos are paying
not
higher
saying
prices
everything's
for
great.
food, gas,
But I just want to
medicine,
establish
rent.
some facts here, which is that unemployment is at a record low. And then also the fact that people have more job options than they've ever had before, which is why you see a labor shortage in so many hospitalities, because people are able to go and get a better job and make more money in those better jobs. So now, do people perceive, like, is the public perception matching some of those data points? No, it's not. And gas prices have gone down recently. People are still paying a lot in grocery stores. That is kind of the field right now. But Danielle, you're talking about making an economic argument. You think that could maybe be, well, let me finish the question really fast. That you want to maybe make that argument, that you think it would be a strong one for Republicans heading into 2024, but none of the candidates are doing that.
Well, 100% it would make a strong argument, because our poll shows that it's inflation, economic opportunity, or the economy and jobs that are number one, number two, and number three. And then comes these other issues. Look, the situation with Israel may have now changed the whole game.
How so?
Well,
It's, when it comes to foreign policy, it only matters when there is world conflict. This is a time of trouble. I was telling Cristobal, I thought the president did a phenomenal job in his speech, in his remarks for Israel. In fact, I even almost applauded him. Because it was strong.
Almost.
It was strong.
Let's face it, you did secretly.
I don't like his politics. I'll be honest with you. I don't like his politics.
But are you saying that
he
think
taxes and he overregulates and he attacks energy
But you didn't
are you
answer her
saying-
question. Why aren't the candidates talking
well,
about the
okay, let's
issues you
address
just
that
talked
first,
about?
and then I'll ask you a
They're not.
follow-up on
They're-
Israel.
They're
But
going to a different place.
But my
And those
point
are your
is,
people.
it is a time of conflict right now, and things can go south really fast if a bad decision is made. And people are worried. And
so is there
that
any
kind of
candidate, though,
increases to the top.
since Trump isn't your number one choice, is there a candidate that you see out in the field right now that you think is making an argument to Latino voters?
I think it's between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis at this point.
Ron DeSantis, how so?
Well, obviously he's shown great results with the economy in Florida. There's a lot of productivity in Florida and low unemployment.
Federal policies.
He likes to reduce regulations, reduce the tax burden on people, which I believe increases productivity. Big believer in school choice that empowers the parent. He's a conservative through and through, and so am I. So I align with a lot of the cultural policies as well. So yeah, I think a lot of Republicans would see Ron DeSantis' nomination as positive. But it looks like Nikki Haley is starting to sort of separate herself a little bit, and that's strong too. I mean, she's just as strong on all these issues.
On Israel, why do you think that could change dynamics? Are you saying that you think it could attract Latino voters more towards Biden
Well,
as opposed to Trump?
maybe,
Because
yeah,
he did just come out going after
So far, I think
Prime Minister
President
Netanyahu.
Biden has handled the situation better than Trump has. Yes, I'll be honest with that. I don't have any problems when he's right, to say that he's right. Look, you can get domestic policy wrong, and people suffer. But if you get foreign policy wrong, people die. That's just a fact. And if we make the wrong choices and make the wrong decisions and get in prematurely or stoke emotions that can provoke more declared aggressions, our boys are going to go in, our men and women, in the military, and then it's anybody's game. And we've seen what happens, with Iraq and these conflicts. People die.
Laura,
And
this is an endorsement.
I was going to say, are
It
you
gets
going to
really
put this
important.
in
It's
an
real
ad?
This is not recorded. Right?
Well, to Trump's credit, none of that happened during his administration. How about that? But the point is, we were also showing weakness during this administration. Look, Russia felt strong enough to take on Ukraine. Now, of course, we had Hamas go into Israel. What is it, China with Taiwan next? Because they feel the weakness? So this isn't an endorsement of Biden. I'm saying that he gave an amazing speech, and I loved it. I applauded it. And thank God, we need a president who's going to be smart, who's going to be astute on the issue, on foreign policy, and I'm praying for him that he gets it right.
Can't argue with that.
So, you earlier talked about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are two states where last go around President Biden's campaign did try to talk to Latinos there, and it did help. I mean, at the margins,
Oh, yeah.
they contributed to. I was there in Pennsylvania. They did contribute to his successes in those states. Are you going to change the approach this time around, though, specifically with how you reach out to not just English-speaking Latinos, but Spanish-speaking Latinos as well?
So, two thoughts on this. One is, you're right. The Biden campaign in 2020 focused significant resources and time on Latino voters in those key states. I had to jot these down because my memory is so bad. But in Pennsylvania, he won by 80,000 votes. Latino vote margin was through the roof in the final days. In Arizona, 11,000 vote. The Latino vote margin, the net for Biden, 97,000 votes. In Nevada, he won by 34,000 votes. The net Latino vote, 34,000 was the difference. He had a net of 80,000 Latino votes. I mean, if you just go down state by state, that was close, and that made the difference. It was Latino voters overperforming for Biden, right? And his numbers didn't go down, they went up. In Wisconsin, it was like the record high of like 80% of Latino voters that voted went for Biden. And so I wouldn't argue, I don't work for the campaign, but I wouldn't argue to them that they needed to change any of that approach. I would say keep building upon the success that you've had. And I was proud of working closely with the president on the campaign when we were the very first. Remember, it was a crowded Democratic primary, kind of like what you guys are going through over there. And Joe Biden was the first to run a Spanish language ad. Even though he got into the race, in some cases almost 6 months after others, he was the first out with Spanish. In Pennsylvania, where Maria is from, my colleague, he simultaneously launched an ad filmed in the Lehigh Valley, which is sort of a key area in Pennsylvania that's a battleground but very heavy Latino population, with the launch. His very first meeting after launching the campaign and going to Nevada was with Dreamers. He was the very first person to meet with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. He did something incredible, which is he promised me when we were doing the campaign that he wanted the campaign to reflect the country, and that if he was lucky enough to become elected president, he wanted his government to look like the country. And I'm one of these believers, I think you and I will agree on this, having served in the White House as well, like people are policy, like getting the right people in place makes a difference. Right. He has 4 Latino cabinet members. That has never happened before. Almost 20% of the administration Latino. And he's solid on all of the other numbers with other demographics too, and that makes a difference. So I would say, put your foot on the gas. Don't make any adjustments in terms of like the focus and dedication to Latinos. I would, of course, always argue for more resources because that's just what we do. But I think they're well positioned. And I forgot one very important point. The person he selected and hired to run his reelection campaign is Julie Chavez Rodriguez, the granddaughter of Cesar Chavez, and she's a badass. So I feel really good about all those things.
But so many voters I talk to, Latino voters, will often tell you, look, representation doesn't mean that their values are necessarily, or that the issues that they want prioritized are necessarily what is prioritized. And some of the consultants on the ground in Southwest states that I've talked to recently say that that President Biden is underperforming local candidates by about 8 or so points in their internal polling. So again, I know you say that it's far out from the election, that there's a lot of time to communicate to Latino voters, but Latinos aren't on the same channels that other voters are.
Yep.
They get a lot of their information from social media, they get a lot of their information from WhatsApp, from all these other platforms, and specifically with young Latino men, President Biden doesn't do so well. So what exactly is your message to them?
Well, two things here. One, part of it is about message. And on the message side, if you look just at the most recent midterm election, the issues that move, not just Latino voters, but all voters, come back to the economy, and jobs. So obviously leaning in there and showing the success stories. We're talking about the Southwest. There are amazing stories of people coming out of the pandemic, starting new businesses. Latinos are at the top, and we come to creating new businesses. We're entrepreneurial, as you said, and the administration has done a really great job. The president's done a really great job of making sure that that infrastructure is there to help Latinos up. I think that's a key part of the message. There are other things in the message that we'll see a lot of. You know, I don't mean to sound cheesy or alarmist, but I do fear that our democracy is at stake in the election. We saw, I'm serious, Daniel. Listen, there was a goddamn coup down the street here at the Capitol on January 6th. I mean, it is serious.
Criminals.
Yes, criminals led by a criminal. And so I do think our democracy is honestly on the line. Some of our core rights are on the line. I never thought, I'm a dad, I have 2 little girls, 5 and 2. I never thought I'd wake up, and my background is in civil rights, I never thought I'd wake up in the morning and suddenly they would have fewer rights than their mom had the night before. That has never happened in this country before. So all of that stuff is on the line, and we'll have to engage and talk about it in a smart way. The one other tactical thing I'll say, and I'm not like oversharing stuff I'm not supposed to share because this we've talked about once before publicly, is that in places like Nevada and Arizona in particular, we've always done this thing where we kind of like, we're going to talk to Latinos and we're going to do it on this channel. And then we're going to talk to black voters on this channel. And then we're going to reach young voters this way and AAPI voters. And we've done so much slicing and dicing and micro-targeting. And what I want to do in this cycle is, especially in the Southwest, is treat Latinos like a general market audience, like a swing voter in a general market, so that when we're running an ad, which now we're up with in Nevada, it's not like, oh, that's a Latino ad. It's like, here's an ad showing the success of the economy or jobs or whatever it is, with Latinos in it or in other members of the community.
But is that just on regular network TV? Or
across the board, yeah.
It's also on social media?
Yeah, so it's just starting, but of course we'll be very aggressive on all channels, whether it's YouTube, social media, you name it. Like, we'll get to voters where they are, but the key is going to be resources and messages, you pointed out. So we'll be in all those places.
Danielle, on abortion, you know, Latinas are more active in politics than young Latinos. That's what the data
Probably
shows.
true. Yeah.
That they turn out in greater numbers. And Latinos do also care about abortion access. What exactly, you know, I've talked to Republicans in Arizona who say we see the cliff on abortion and Republicans are going right over it in a state like that. Yeah. So how do Republicans even win back a state like Arizona, appealing to Latino voters who are key there
they just might lose
on that issue?
They just might lose because for me, being pro-life is not about politics. I'm not going to change my politics to try to win, or I'm not going to change my views on abortion and being pro-life to win a political race. I will always be pro-life because I value life. For me, it's the sanctity of life. So you just might have to lose, but stand on principle. See, the thing is, I've always believed that as a politician, you have to persuade people of 2 main theses. One is that you care. And you show you care by showing up, by representing them, by doing the commercials through segmentations, and, you know, I see you as an individual, you know, because if they feel that you don't care, it's over, the game's over, it doesn't matter. And that's what happened with Republicans for the longest time. They felt they didn't care about them because they never showed up. 2, that your ideas are better, your ideas are superior to the other guy, right? Because fundamentally, when we walk into a voting booth, we ask ourselves one question: will my life and the life of my family be better off if I vote for this person or that person, right? And so, but for me, the reason I became a Republican to begin with, you know, as a Christian man, was because I was pro-life. That is never going to change, and I'm not going to alter my view on that for politics. I'm not going to cheapen myself like that. So, look, I will tell you this, though, and this is probably a bad time to bring this up, but the reason that Republicans have the majority in the House is because of 6 Republican Latinos who flipped blue seats in the last election. And they ran on pro-life. They didn't shy away from it. You know, it's like sometimes you just have to stand on principle and be transparent about who you are instead of trying to be evasive or, oh, yeah, you know, well, maybe, you know, it's to try to not emphasize it here, but emphasize it in different audiences. Look, I think you just have to be principled, period, sometimes, and you take the shot.
But a national ban, which a number of candidates have endorsed on abortion access, isn't popular with the majority of voters. So if you aren't going to potentially run on that or if you don't think that that's a way to win Latino voters,
Then
and
they
not
run on a
counting-
mission. They just don't mention it.
they don't mention it.
Well, you know, unless it's brought up, then of course, you know, they're going to have to talk about it. But again, you know, if it is brought up, just state your principle. Just state your value. That's all there is to it. Look, that's probably bad advice, but that's who I am as a person.
Down ballot, where do you think? Because nationally, a lot of the argument that you're making that Republicans should run on is not what they're running on. You know, it's not what the nominee is running, or the potential, who looks like the inevitable nominee is running on.
Which
So-
is interesting because they are making the mistake of the mistake that I feel that the left has been doing for some time now. And that is that the left comes into minority communities and imposes an agenda. They don't listen to the community and listen to what they are going through and what their priorities are, what women are going through, the youth, business owners, people of faith. Each one of them has different priorities or you know, different sentiments about different issues. What are their priorities? What they come is to impose abortion or a green agenda or whatever, you know, the cause celeb is, as opposed to, you know, why is this community suffering? Well, it's because they're attacking energy and they're losing their high-paying energy jobs in South Texas, or because they're not taking care of the border, or because they're not reducing the tax burden, or because they're regulated to the nth degree where you can't even start up a business anymore. So what I'm saying is, to your point, Republicans need to get on the ball too and listen to where the communities are from state to state or even from county to county and have these conversations. But that takes showing up and connecting with the Latino community and you know, make your case as to, you know, how your agenda is going to make my life better.
Okay, I'm going to open this up to audience questions. So, over right here. And if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi there. My name's Christian Thimianos. I am Vice President of GLPI. I really appreciate you guys coming over here. Laura, you brought up a really important point, I think, about like communication channels. And I think during the last three or so years that we're kind of seeing how important communication is. Our families use Facebook and WhatsApp for information, for communication, but we saw record amounts of misinformation spreading across those issues, specifically targeting Latinos, on issues like voting and healthcare. So I'm from Las Vegas, and I saw Democrats making moves to combat that, whereas Republicans weren't as involved. So I have a question for both of you. Is one, are Republicans prioritizing fighting misinformation this election cycle to help get Latinos to the polls? And two, what kind of new strategies are Democrats using to help combat misinformation?
Yeah, so look, I want Latinos voting. I want as many Latinos to vote as possible. In fact, I believe in Nevada, only 51% of registered Latinos voted. 200,000 of them did not. That's a big pool of voters that were left on the table. And you know what we do at the Libre Action, we have a data system. We know where every voter is at. We know their race, gender, the whole thing. We've started to get pretty good where we know the alignment of the person before we even knock on the door. So it's either a turnout kind of effort or it's a persuading effort. And it takes, look, right now, no offense, but media has really low trust. Parties have real low trust, both Democrats and Republicans. No, not Laura, I'm sorry, but yeah, media in general, but she's a member of the media. They don't trust the media. They don't trust parties. You know who they trust? It's the people they go to church with, that they go to school with, that they work with, their neighbors. And that's who we mobilize. right? You know, we train them on you know, on the issues that they align with, what are the better ideas, and then go out into the neighborhoods and do the work. But you know, when you see somebody who is going through the same hardships you are, talking about the issues that are going to reverse the situation, that engages people, that encourages them to get out and vote. And that does turn out more people, I think, when they see themselves reflected in the person in the front door.
I'm going to push you a little bit, though, because that isn't totally answering his question, which is...
We talked about turnout.
Well, he was asking, are Republicans doing anything? Is Libre doing anything?
They're doing something. They're causing the disinformation.
Well, to try to
How so?
combat election fraud,
Give me
disinformation...
one instance
Let me ask this question.
Your candidate is pushing an election lie every day.
Cristobal, hold on one
That's
second.
a disinformation.
So, is Libre doing anything to try to make sure that Latinos know the truth about election systems and not that there was election fraud, because there wasn't, not widespread that caused the election to be
give
stolen,
me an example
or
of
about
where the
COVID-19?
misinformation is.
It was occurring. There's been plenty. My colleagues wrote about it. I wrote about it on Spanish language media.
I don't know what to answer to. I'm not sure what the disinformation
Republican candidates were pushing conspiracy theories about election fraud, and they were also pushing conspiracy theories about COVID-19.
Has Libre actually advanced these stupid ideas?
I'm not saying
saying
Libre.
Libre.
I'm not
Okay.
saying
No.
Libre at all. I'm saying
She means-
is
no, he's talking
Libre
about
So I'll
or
tell you
Republicans?
how we're mitigating that. We're strong in free speech. And what we believe is more speech to counter misinformation. We're out there talking to our communities, telling the truth about things. Now, if you can give me an example where I'm not telling the truth, I'd be glad to hear it.
Well, we're not talking about you, Daniel.
so-
We're talking about
Of course not.
Republican
Look,
candidates that you may support.
I'll be deadly honest with you. Because we are probably the only center-right conservative Latino organization in the country. We're in 15 states. We have about 70 full-time staff, about 500 part-time workers, thousands of volunteers. We have a responsibility to model what proper advocacy is. And I take that responsibility serious. And I will never willingly lie about anything. And I reject all this stuff about that President Biden didn't win or that there was whatever. I don't. All I can tell you is that I want Latinos to be talking about these issues, and you know, making sure that we are blowing away these idiots, you know, who are talking about this stuff.
Danielle, I understand that Libre did not, as you said, and you did not spread those conspiracy theories, but there are a wide number of Republicans that are continuing to spread conspiracy theories.
Well, I mean, the
about
whole
election
Russia
fraud.
collusion thing was a massive conspiracy
Those are
theory.
not.
May I-
That's
So,
that's
but
a-
it's misinformation that went out to the Latino community that was never countered by you guys, was it?
Daniel, let me.
So it's
two
playing
things
on
here.
both sides too.
All right, this
Por
is-
favor.
I think your question is a great question,
Sure it is.
right? And I have a view that's different than his, but I think Daniel, to me, look, we come from similar backgrounds, right? We're both from Texas, if I recall
No,
correctly.
Washington State, but
Oh, sorry. But your family, no, weren't they?
I was born in
Texas?
California.
Okay, so
We're from
I now live in
California.
Texas.
So then you were in Washington State.
Yes.
I moved to Washington State. I remember there was a similarity there. Like I think you were a farm worker. You're the children of farm workers.
so that was
My
19.
parents, my mom came from Zacatecas. Migrant farm workers.
Nuevo
We
León.
ended up here. Thank God. And you moved to Washington. I ended up moving to Washington. He moved to Washington. He became a police officer. I moved to Washington. I became a civil rights lawyer and sued cops. So something happened, and I think it was disinformation that got to him. He ended up over here with this
Go ahead,
madness. But in all honesty, I think, look, it is a huge problem, and
It's a problem.
it's a problem because for a couple things. One is we talk about channels and like social media, and there's less of that in social media, and it's getting worse. If you look at, X, former Twitter, like there's a shit ton of disinformation on there that isn't corrected. Facebook, I've talked about my tias the other day. I have one tia, Maria, who gets a lot of disinformation from Facebook, right? And we're seeing it all over the place. And Eki's had a great study that got deeper into like the cause of it. But honestly, the way to stop it is, and you mentioned the media, is like we really need to ask our tias and our friends and others to do some fact checking on their own and check your sources, and then the parties and candidates and others need to push on that too.
I agree with that 100%. But if you're asking for Nina Jankowicz, the truth czar, to be the arbiter of who's telling the truth and who isn't, I reject that
That's
100%.
well, I could
That's
go down
a
that
very
rabbit hole.
deep cut that could address if anyone has a question about it. But let's go to another student question.
Actually, can you just
If
say
you
one thing
wanna-
about it? Yeah, please.
Well, Nina Jankowicz was initially appointed to lead a governance board that was supposed to crack down on disinformation across agencies across the government. And Fox News, essentially, along with a number of Republican House members, demonized her and went after her, and she was doxxed, and she's received death threats, and all because she was trying to ensure that disinformation was something that was tackled, but not to censor Americans. But we have other
So
questions.
you see what happened there? He did disinformation and she corrected him. I was
Well,
like,
but see,
yes,
again,
Do
it's
you have a
not
question?
true what you said.
Okay, it's not.
She left a
true,
lot of it
but
out.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Angelica. I'm a second-year master's in journalism student. I'm also the head of communications at LAPA, Latin American Caribbean Policy. So my question is, so when talking about Latino vote, the term Latino is pretty relative. For example, Mexicans do not vote like Salvadorans, no Salvadorans vote like Cubans or Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, or Guatemalans, and Puerto Ricans are very distinct because Puerto Ricans are American citizens. But a commonality between some of these countries mentioned above is thousands upon thousands have arrived to the United States, especially during the last year. So my question is, do you really believe that both parties have acted accordingly to the topic of immigration, which is one of the top issues for most Latinos? Because, I mean, you had the vice president telling Guatemalan migrants, do not come, and then you had presidential candidate Ron DeSantis, who governs a state with a high population of Latinos, specifically Venezuelans, and then sends them to the vice president's house. So are Republicans and Democrats really making Latino issues a priority if they can't even get together as parties to resolve the critical issue of migration or understand what differentiates us Latinos as a community?
You guys have 10 seconds to solve the immigration crisis.
You know, remember that time we actually wanted to try to work on that together and got in trouble.
Yeah, we did. I know. Yeah. So it's the Biden administration that has actually flown folks across the country by the hundreds of thousands. I'm from McAllen. I take the same flights as they do. So it's not just the Republican governors. It's a mess. It's a broken system. Immigration is good, but the system is broken, and that's the main problem. The way I see it is that one party has a fixed position of legal channels only. The other party has a fixed position of border enforcement only. One won't move on the other until the other gives way. And what's happened is, for the longest time, I think there's been a disillusion in Latinos here with Democrats on immigration, because Democrats, in election after election, have promised that they will achieve immigration reform. And then when they say, well, what happened? They'll say, well, the Republicans, didn't play ball. But you didn't say that.
true.
What you did say was you were going to get immigration reform, and now you're giving me excuses. And we're just tired of it.
Okay, so
What Biden had said, I'll wrap up here. What Biden had said is, I will reach across the aisle and work with Republicans to achieve immigration reform. He hasn't convened them once to the White House to talk about immigration reform and doesn't care to.
okay, so a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there is. It's complicated.
On Joe Biden's very first day in office, he brought to Congress a comprehensive immigration reform plan, and it got stuck. Why? Because Republicans voted against it. Time and time again, this is the best excuse Republicans come up with. Anytime you attack movement on immigration, everyone will say, oh, the Democrats never want to do anything about it. They promised this and that. And that's just not the case. Who votes for it and against it? Time and time again, it's always Republicans who stand against it. And my
remember
theory,
Trent
my
Lott
theory,
passed it in the Senate.
I didn't cut you off. My theory here, and I hate to say it, but I think the reason Republicans haven't wanted to pass immigration reform is because they don't want more Latino voters, because they vote Democrat.
Santo Dios.
That is my personal belief
Oh
on the
my
matter.
gosh.
Time and time again, voting
That's
against immigration
a calumny.
reform. To your point,
offensive.
I think that there's cruelty on the Republican side on the issue. You mentioned
And vice versa.
when migrants were coming, and I'm from El Paso. It is the modern day Ellis Island, and there was a real problem in El Paso with the state of emergency, in that there were so many folks, because of COVID, because of massive problems in their home countries, that were coming across. And my mom, you'll appreciate this, Daniel, like, my family's Catholic, my brother is a Franciscan. Every Sunday they feed the homeless. Like, that's just something that the family does. And the population was shifting, right? More and more migrants were coming, and you know, the community really wanted to reach out and help, and does in a way that is remarkable and beautiful. But then you see Abbott, the governor, trying to make a stunt out of it and send them, whether it's to the vice president's house in freezing weather with no blankets, no jackets, whether it is DeSantis sending folks to Martha's Vineyard. I mean, they try to make a stunt out of it, and these are people's lives that are, in some cases, running for their lives. So I think the Republicans have been cruel on the issue. I think that there is an opportunity to come together at some point. I think we need a reasonable, I mean, you don't even have a Speaker of the House. Like, we need somebody to work with at some point, right, to be able to get it done.
So under Trump, he had a 4-point plan. It was the wall, it was refugee and legal allotments on the lottery, and then of course the Democrats said no, hell no on the wall. But wait a minute, 2 million dreamers will be legalized, and we made the argument, give him the wall, like parts of the wall that he's going to build it anyways. But they said no. See, the thing is that Democrats they need this issue too. It's not like, oh, the Republicans are cruel. These guys are cruel too, because they won't give on their position. They won't help out and reconcile their differences. And here's the thing, guys. Democrats don't get to define what immigration reform is, and neither do Republicans. They have to come together and reach a consensus and reconcile the differences. Neither side is willing. So if you're accusing Republicans of being cruel because they won't reconcile those differences, neither will the Democrats, and they're just as cruel.
I think it's a different issue altogether. I will have a little bit. I do have a little bit of hope. I saw
Lives are at
Veronica
stake here in
Escobar from
Cristobal.
my hometown is working on a bipartisan potential, right? Like,
And we're all in.
we got to wait and see what happens there. But look, we fought over this issue for a long time, and I think at the end of the day, like, you and I both want the country to get to a place, right, on this. So
even. Yes.
I'm going to be hopeful on this at some point. We're going to get it done.
So too.
Right here. Let's get another few in if we can.
Oh yeah, sorry, I talked too long there. Excuse me.
Thank you. I'm Andres. I'm a second-year student in the college. I'm also the secretary of LASA.
And the tallest person here.
I'm also pretty tall. LASA, which is the biggest Hispanic and Latino organization on campus. So first of all, I'm Venezuelan, and I'm a Democrat as well. I've been to Miami a lot of times, and I can hear for myself how effective the Republican messaging on socialism has been against Democrats. And my question is, what efforts, if any, is the Democratic Party doing to counter that information on socialism, to counter the complete loss of South Florida that Democrats have had in recent years?
You know, it's you mentioned this earlier. Like the best way to reach voters, especially Latino voters, is through people that they trust, right? And I would love to get you out there talking about this. I'm glad you're a Democrat. I hope that your message will be effective with your friends and family back home on Thanksgiving, whenever you get a chance to get folks together to explain to them what's really going on there. And you're right, the right wing has used the socialism attack effectively. It hasn't, you may disagree with this, but I don't think that has permeated much outside of Southern Florida. It has been frustrating, though, and I remember, and I was talking to my colleague Maria about this, my last trip to Miami was campaigning with the vice president in the final days of the election, and I remember getting to Miami with some very nice, significant rallies. We went up to a little outside of Miami as well, but the socialism message has always been one that they can use effectively and run away from. And it's hard to, when you ask them, like, what do you actually really mean by that? If you look at what Trump's policies were, who acts kind of like a strongman dictator, right? Which are what so many people are fleeing from. And so it's hard to destroy a one word or 10-second hit, because you've got to explain it, right? And so we've got to get tighter about it, and the best way to do it is to get folks like you out there doing it, if you're willing.
It has spread far beyond just Florida. Look, in Harris County in Houston, there's 500,000 non-Mexican Latinos now. It is incredibly diverse, and it's Colombians, it's Venezuelans, it's Cubans. All of them were negatively impacted by socialism. And for us, when we talk about socialism as the center right, it is the centralization of power and money and control in the hands of politicians. More and more, the políticas de índole socialista, the índole, o sea, the socialist type. They're not, taking over the means of production. But in a very real way, they are empowering the government to usurp the role of the family, of the church, of the market, more and more. Every mandate, every rule, every law, every regulation is the government telling you how to behave more and more and more, to the point where it's a hardship now to even start a business because there's just so much red tape to go through. And everybody during COVID really saw how the long arm of the government can shut you down real fast with any excuse. That was warning bells, alarm bells to a lot of Mexican Latinos who haven't had to face socialism in the worst kind, like Cuba and Venezuela. But the warning is there, and it's coming from your population too, from your paisanos.
Any more questions? Love to take, yeah, right here. Oh, yeah, we can go you first, and then we'll go over here.
Hello, my name is Michelle Mesa. I'm part of GLPI, which is the Georgetown Latino Policy Initiative. I'm Peruvian American. And you guys have spoken about Wisconsin. I, full disclosure, work for the Biden campaign in Wisconsin as a field organizer, doing Hispanic constituency outreach precisely. But, I think you don't need to be working in one of these states to know that Latinos are not a monolith, nor Latinos are a single issue demographic, right? So you guys have particularly for Daniel, it's my question, things that Latinos care about that we see this in poll after poll, right? Jobs, currently record high point under this administration. Inflation, we care about inflation, is going down, keeps going down consistently. We care about educations, Republican education.
It's come at a high price. Interest rates now are super high. That was done to bring down inflation. It's
exactly.
Okay, so it's the rate of inflation, but not inflation itself is down.
Right, but it's going down, right? Education, President Biden has canceled millions in student loan debt. Republicans have been against it.
On the backs of the middle class?
It's
not coming
the
free.
majority of the youth support it.
Yeah.
Not to speak about gun violence, which, yeah, it's true, there was a bipartisan Safer Communities Act, but the hardcore Republicans and President Trump backs mostly the NRA.
I will never cede any one of my freedoms, ever.
When Latinos care about, and one of our biggest concerns is gun violence and crime, right? Not to speak about environment, which most Republicans just simply and flat out deny.
We're the cleanest environment in the world.
Okay, so here comes my question. What is exactly, out of everything I've heard, what is exactly what Republicans are offering to our demographic, given everything I've mentioned on the topics we care about?
More money in their pocket, less regulation so they can start businesses, reduce the war on energy. Un país con energía es un país con futuro. We need energy for productivity, high-paying jobs. They're 20% of all the energy jobs, they're taken up by 20% Latinos. In Texas, it's over 30%. High-paying jobs. He is decimating the energy industry. He as in Biden.
Crystal ball, it's doing it single-handed.
I hate energy.
When we talk about decentralizing power, parents get to decide the kind of education that they want for their children. So we're doing that from state to state, with ESAs and school choice. Healthcare should be personalized. It's what you need, not what the government wants to impose, which is exactly the kind of Medicare for All program that they're talking about. And again, it would take 14% of the entire economy and take it under the federal government, the índole socialista. Yeah. We don't need any of that. Okay, we have the highest quality healthcare system in the world. We just have to, of course, make it affordable and accessible. There's only 5% are Spanish-speaking doctors. We need more Spanish-speaking doctors. So anyways, the point is, on issue after issue after issue, there's a lot that we can do. There is common ground. On issues of criminal justice reform, I think there's a lot of work there. On immigration reform, we can come together and work on that as well. There's so much work to do, but if you're going to offer up the government as the answer to every social ill under the sun, I reject that. I don't want to give more power to politicians here in Washington, D.C. I want to give power to the individual. That's true freedom. If we have a mess in Venezuela and in Cuba, and now, of course, with Petro in Colombia, and these other Latin American, from the entire Western Hemisphere is now left of center except for Uruguay. Who would have thought? We'll see what happens in Argentina, but the point is, I'm a center-right. I'm a conservative. Conservative means less government, limited government, rein it in.
So
Can you
I know we're over
I want
time.
to get one more in,
Yep.
so if you could keep it brief.
I just have, thank you for the question. I'll just rebut that with one point, which is there was a huge postmortem in the last election, the biggest poll. The one thing that stood out to me in response to what you just said is 65% of Latinos think the Republican Party either doesn't care or is hostile towards Latinos.
That's awful.
So what you're saying, I mean,
need to change
it sounds great in a Libre ad, but Latinos don't feel that way.
Last question, right here.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
I'm not here to defend the Republican Party, just so you know.
Thank you, Daniel and Cristobal. So my name is Reggie. I'm the second year Master of Public Policy, and I was doing election observation during the 2020 election, and I found out that in Texas, actually there was a blue trending on the age between the United States and Mexico. And do you guys think there will be a flip in the foreseeing future? Or how to say Texas is becoming a swing state during the next several elections? And does the Republican have any?
It's been a dream, I think, of Democrats to turn Texas blue.
It's been a dream of mine for a
for a
long
while now.
Actually, my entire life.
And like it's been a dream for us to turn California blue or red. Look, Texas and California, that's half of all Latinos.
Yeah.
That's 20-some million and 11 million in Texas. We're now the plural majority in Texas, Latinos. It is a true fact that there is not one statewide elected Democrat in Texas, and there isn't one statewide elected Republican in California. It has been fascinating to see how the Republican Party engaged with Latinos in Texas over the years and how they didn't in California, and they paid a big price for that. I don't know if they'll ever, sure, I guess they could turn Texas blue if you do certain things and demographics change really quick and certain investments are made and we take our foot off the gas pedal.
Trump only won it in 2020, by 5 points, 4 points?
That was going to be my point. Is
Probably.
it is true.
Right.
Lost by like less than 2%, right?
Yeah.
So your question, and this is a dream of mine. And like he said, his dream is California. Like I would love. It's the ball game. If we can flip Texas, game over, right? It's just so large, so many electoral votes, so many congressional seats, but it's difficult. It is a red state, trending I think in the right direction, but it needs significant investments, right?
I think since 2016, Texas has been trending lean.
Well, so
Right,
get
well,
this.
well, let me just finish that. Let me just finish my
Monica
point.
de la Cruz, my congresswoman, 85% Latino district, she flipped the blue seat.
Well, that's the District 15 that
But
is
so did Tony
gerrymandered.
Gonzalez, 75% Latino
Four
district.
Republicans, 2
Flip
win,
the
right?
blue seat.
And that's the problem, right? So you nailed it. Gerrymandering is a huge problem affecting flipping the state. For real. I mean, come on. You know, gerrymandering affects other states too. Not in your favor, but maybe in Democrats' favor.
what happens with
But my
Myra.
point is, if you look at the cities where we have rapid growth, those, correct me if I'm wrong, but every major city in Texas is blue.
Yes.
It's outside of the cities that we have trouble.
Although the Dallas mayor just switched parties.
I saw that. That's crazy. Good point. He, what did they say, vendido?
No, vendido, yeah.
Basically, I think the takeaway is that it may not happen this year for Democrats. Colin Allred in the Senate race is definitely trying to make it happen there. But
Yeah, good point.
the Democrats that I've spoken to, the Republicans that I've spoken to, in addition to you two, don't think it's really going to happen in 2024.
Much less in California, right?
And definitely not in California.
Central Valley.
I think that that's it, unless we have, should we wrap it up? Or can I let one more ask one? Are you guys okay staying
Sure,
for one
yeah.
more? I know I'm stretching you. In the back, we'll do one more. Right there.
I'm Yaj, I'm a freshman in the SFS. So Daniel,
He's
you
in
said,
my SST, my student group.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a badass.
thank you. So Daniel, you said that the Biden administration is attacking energy, but polling shows that 76% of Latino voters support aggressive climate change policy. So where do you think the average
Well,
Latino voter will
yeah,
stand?
okay. So it all depends how you ask the question. If you ask the question like just straight up, do they care about the climate change? Well, of course. Who doesn't? I do. If you say, well, if Biden were to impose a green energy agenda that's going to cost you 20% more in your electricity bill, would you be for it? No. It goes down to like really low numbers. So yes, of course we care about the environment. Yes, we care about clean water, clean air, forested, lands and public lands and conservation. But at what cost? Jobs. That we're not going to make it, from paycheck to paycheck. Then things change all of a sudden.
I'll be very quick because I know we're way over time. I think this drill baby drill argument is like, it doesn't work anymore, especially with Latinos. Maybe when Sarah Palin was out there running for office, maybe that worked then, but not really for Latinos. Because you're right, Latinos care deeply about the environment, deeply. Not only from an environmental justice perspective, because in our communities we have greater rates of cancer because of it, asthma, et cetera, because of the pollution, but because, as I said earlier, we are a very young community, other than me. Like, Latinos are pretty young, and young people care deeply about the environment. They want a future. Like, I want a future for my daughters to have like a clean energy future, right? They want to be able to breathe the air. We want to be able to, and we have great, they care more about drilling, apparently. And if you look at the success of the clean energy policies in Nevada and elsewhere, which is why we're running ads talking about the clean energy economy, because it's created so many millions of jobs. I mean, it's a win-win for being able to breathe, being able to live on this planet, and jobs. So I think we win that argument any day of the week.
Well,
And with that, we'll end there. Thank you to Danielle Garza. Thank you to Cristobal Alex.
Thank you to you.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you to all of you for joining us. I'm sure the other conversations you go to this semester will not be as lively as this one.